Welcome to this special event for European Day celebration sponsored by the European Studies Center, European Union Studies Center. And you'll find out why that's important. It's my pleasure to extend greetings from Interim President Chase Robinson, in particular to our distinguished guest, Ambassador Christos O. Panagopoulos, the Ambassador of Greece to the United States. The Graduate Center is the principal doctorate-granting institution of the City University of New York. It offers more than 30 doctoral degrees from anthropology to urban education and is the home to some 30 research centers. It is also a platform for public performance, discussion, and debate. We're a community of 7,000 students, scholars, and researchers dedicated to the idea that learning is a public good, and this evening's presentation is evidence of that commitment. In 1974, the Graduate Center supported the creation of a Center for European Studies, which brought together scholars from various disciplines and community audiences interested in post-war European and transatlantic affairs, and encouraged collaboration with other universities in the New York metropolitan area. In 1992, the then president of the Graduate Center, Francis Deegan Horowitz, encouraged the renaming of the center as the European Union Studies Center. This new designation reflected the changes that had taken place in Europe in the previous 2 decades. Today, the center is a highly valued member of our research centers. In 2013, the center came under the new leadership of Professor Christa Altenstetter, Professor of Political Science. She will introduce this evening's speaker. Please welcome Professor Altenstetter.
Good evening. I'm honored and privileged to welcome you to our second Europe Day celebration at the European Union Studies Center at the Graduate Center of the City University of New York, where scholars, academics, students, diplomats, and friends meet and greet. Every year, May 9th is celebrated across Europe in memory of the Schuman Declaration on May 9, 1950, which laid the foundation of what became the European Union. Why are so many people indifferent to the European Union today and telling us that we should not pay attention to European political leaders, but listen to national political voices instead? These people argue that more Europe means stagnation, bad policy decisions, inequality, austerity, and marginalization. I would like to argue that they are completely missing the point. The crucial thing to understand about May 9th is to remember the essence of the Schuman Declaration made by then French Foreign Minister Robert Schuman. Despite the recent financial crisis in Europe, his message should never be forgotten. Reconciliation among 2 arch enemies, France and Germany. Rather than settling their conflicts by war, Robert Schuman spoke about how to reconstruct and spur economic growth, how to avoid a Third World War, how to overcome extreme nationalism, and recognition that national sovereignty can be dangerous if excessive. To achieve peace and reconstruction, supranational institutions must be built, and European solutions must be instituted based on international law rather than solely by the political will of the day that may exist today but vanish tomorrow. In the more than 60-year history of what is today the European Union, politicians have come and gone, but European solutions and EU institutions have secured long-lasting peace in Europe and partnerships and friendships across borders. As a teen growing up in Heidelberg, located in the former American occupation zone in Germany. I recall vividly the day after the Schuman Declaration. Suddenly, hope was in the air. The conversation of adults and teachers started to change in tone. They began to talk about the future and what they would do next. Up until this point, we have been living in a fairly depressing environment. I also vividly recall the beginning of international exchanges between German and French school children a few years later. It began with high schools, then extended to college students, partnerships between German and French city starters, professional groups would meet across borders, various civil society groups began to start exchanges, and this expanded to other groups. These practices, this approach to overcoming century-old hate and animosities, by starting with the young and extending cooperative relations across civil society and cities at the grassroots level, turned out to be an invaluable investment and the best foreign policy tool to state building and reconstructing society. I believe this still holds true today. In that same spirit of cross-national collaboration, it is my honor and my pleasure to introduce His Excellency, Mr. Christos Panagopoulos, Ambassador of Greece to the United States. His remarks this evening will speak to the current and upcoming agenda of the European Union. Greece has held the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union since January 1st. Prior to his current post as Greek ambassador to the US, Ambassador Panagopoulos was both ambassador to the Republic of Serbia and ambassador to the Republic of Cyprus. He has also served as Consul General in Los Angeles and Dean of the New England Consular Corps in Boston. Ambassador Panagopoulos has received many awards over his career, including the Grand Commander of the Order of Phoenix of the Hellenic Republic and the Grand Commander of the Order of Merit of the Republic of Cyprus. I'm sure you all join me in welcoming Ambassador Panagopoulos.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you very much. And I've heard a very, very encouraging thing that you are the president, not an interim anymore. So I'd like, I just met with you. I'd like to wish you all the best in this very responsive position you are taking. And indeed, this is a great institution. Hey, it's Friday evening. The weather is not very helpful. So I take all of you that are very heroic, pro-European soldiers, let's say, and you came here to join me celebrate one of the most important days in European unity. Because for all of us, not only for Europeans, I should suggest, but also for our American friends, because transatlantic community is the backbone for the world order. So what happens in Europe, it's certainly very important here in this great country also. What do we celebrate here in the midst of a crisis? That's a paradox, but Greece is full of paradoxes. Sometimes they, as you heard the President saying, Greece holds the rotating presidency of the European Council. And some people, especially friends at the Congress, they tell me, wait a moment, they found you, Greece, you asked for help to be the president? Well, the answer is very simple. The rotating presidency is not an option. We didn't ask for it. It's institutionally based, it's an obligation, and I dare say that my country has the experience. We count 5 successful presidencies in the past with great results, and we're determined to ask this institutional obligation in the very best way. But why it is very important this day for all of us? Especially the younger generation, and I see some members of the younger generation cannot grasp the facts. The very fact that Europe lives for more than 60 years, close to 70 years, in continuous peace This is not given. It's something we succeeded through sacrifices, compromises, through continuous work. And it's a very great thing. And if you imagine the current situation which is developing in Ukraine, you can imagine how important it is to have, as the President said a minute before, two of the major powers in Europe, instead of solving their differences in the old traditional way, to sit down, cooperate, and give the example for the whole continent. A continent which, with the European Union, can tell you, because of the experience of my country for so many years, it's a very positive one. I should dare say that Europe, despite the crisis, what you hear, what you read in the newspapers and the press, it's a success story. Suffice to tell you that in 2012, there was a surprise decision to award the Nobel Peace Prize to the European Union. Some people, they said at the time, oh, wait a moment, what did they do? They are accustomed to award, this great prize to a flamboyant personality with usually short-term, results in their endeavors, but very few, they realize the deeper meaning of this, which is continuous peace and stability in Europe. And then the vision of a united Europe that still is alive today. It is alive because so many countries, they are not members as of now. They have the vision to get in. Why? They realize there is a winning situation there. Because in the context of a democratic environment, with nobody is perfect, of course, but we say that this is an environment which indeed respects human rights, the rights of the minorities, and at the same time brings prosperity through common work. That's the ideal of Europe. And that's what we're trying to do today, joining forces. And talking as a representative of a country which was hurt very bad because of the current economic crisis. You can imagine, some of you are Greek Americans or Greeks, you know what's going on, but the rest, it's very hard to realize how difficult the situation is in Greece. Suffice to tell you that we lost close to 25% of GDP. The way of life we knew just a few years ago has gone. I hope forever, not because I would like to lose our 25 of GDP, but we have to change, to reform. And that's what we are doing right now, with great sacrifice of our people. And this is a message across Europe. But we are succeeding. And the news that are coming from Greece, we have been bombarded for about the last, let's say, 6 or even 7 years about negative things that were happening in Greece. But right now the situation is changing. I'm going to talk in a moment about the achievements of our economy. But let me tell you that the European experiment is a very successful one. And if you go back where we modestly started in 1959, where the first idea, or even before that, was just to make a union of a very modest couple of products, all in all, and then gradually to work our way on, initially with 6 member states, and you see where we are right now, with 28 member states. Some say the most exclusive club in the world. I wouldn't accept that, but it is indeed a very distinguished club of countries that they're bound from the same ideas and principles. So the vision of Jean Monnet and Robert Schuman became reality today, of course with problems, of course with crises. Some, they like to say that the European Union, or the European community before that, it's like a bicycle. If you stop, you fall down. So we never stop. This last crisis, though, I have to say that it was like an earthquake for all of us. We have been used in year after year, prosperity, no major economic, at least, crisis, although we experienced a lot of crisis in the past, but this very last one was something that it took special attention from all over Europe. At the beginning, what brought all the countries, the 6 initial members together, was the very simple thought of merging economic interests rather than anything else, in order to help raise the standards of living and lay the foundation for a more united Europe. In the years that followed, the European Union has expanded and deepened. We have moved closely politically, economically, and even culturally, I should say. In the 1960s, we saw the first signs of economic growth. In the 1970s, we had the first wave of enlargement, while the European Union regional policy started to invest in jobs and infrastructure. In 1979, the European Parliament increased its role, responding to allegations that we had a democratic gap there. So then, back then, for the very first time, the citizens could elect its members directly for the very first time. In the 1980s, we started seeing the changing face of Europe that has resulted in the fall of the Berlin Wall. Later, in 1993, we started thinking about a Europe with no frontiers, a very new concept at the time, since we completed the single market with the 4 freedoms. I remind, movement of goods, movement of services, movement of people and money, free. In addition, Europeans started reflecting on how to act together when it comes to security and defense matters. That goes a step further toward the federal Europe. I'm not sure, but the direction was something like this. During the next decade, the euro became the new currency for many Europeans. The Treaty of Lisbon was ratified by all EU countries before entering into force on the 1st of December 2009, a treaty that provides the European Union with modern institutions and more efficient working methods. I remember, I don't know if in real life Dr. Kissinger said that, but you remember the very famous line saying that if there's a crisis, whom I have to call. Now there's, let's say, a foreign minister. Currently is Lady Ashton, who plays this role, the Vice President of the European Commission, and she's acting, so we build institutions through compromise and consensus, but we do that. The European Union has faced and continues to face many challenges, as we have seen recently, let's say with Ukraine, but internal crises, which are more important for us. What makes this union unique and a true success story is the determination shown by 28 different member states to promote jointly their aspirations for an integrated Europe. Now, Greece, let me tell you a few words about our own experience in the European Union. I remind everyone, first we applied for accession to the then newly established European Economic Community, the EEC, back in June 1959. The next step was the signing of the association agreement between Greece and the EEC in 1961. Greece's application for accession was submitted only in July 1975 because the meantime, as you remember, we had the Houda, the colonists, ruling, unfortunately, my country. So immediately after the fall of the dictatorship, we applied for accession to the European community. In 1981, we joined as a full member, and in 2001, Greece became member of the European Monetary Union, otherwise known as Eurozone. Since then, we have remained at the heart core of Europe, and we have always been a staunch proponent of further integration. In our own small, if you will, scale, we pushed for a more integrated Europe. As it was important for the European project to enlarge and encompass a critical region of southeastern Europe, namely Europe's own historical and cultural birthplace, equally significant, I would say, were the benefits for my country, for Greece. The European Union membership has provided us with an important peace and political stability dividend. In addition to consolidating democracy after 70 years of dictatorship in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the European Union membership has offered Greece a renewed sense of continued security in an often volatile and challenging neighborhood. As I told you before, this is the 5th time we assumed the rotating presidency. The first was in '83. I have some colleagues who have been part of this successful story during our last presidencies. The second was in '88, the third in '94, when Austria, Finland, and Sweden became members and the Treaty of Maastricht entered into force at the same year. In 2003, the fourth Greek presidency promoted the prospect of the EU enlargement over the south and east of Europe in order to ensure stability, development, and prosperity in southeastern Europe. This is the so-called Thessaloniki Agenda, which is valid up to today. And it was in 2004, following the signing of the accession treaty, the year before, during the Greek presidency, that we successfully completed what we call the Big Bang of the accession of no less than 10 new member states. What is the future of Europe? That's a very big philosophical question that is posed today, especially before the European elections across Europe. And its tone is even more significant because we are asking this during a crisis. So I would suggest to you that Europe is struggling to overcome the consequences of an economic crisis that has brought fundamental changes in what we considered up until recently to be state and welfare. The rates of unemployment as a consequence of the crisis, especially in the southern member states, including in the most extreme method in my own country, have infused the need for more social cohesion. Notwithstanding criticism towards the European Union quite regularly, I should say the European Union has proved that it has the tools to create a new set of mechanisms that will enable it to continue the path of growth and economic development and become even stronger in the world economic sphere. In a period of increased Euroscepticism, European societies are seeking a new narrative for a Europe that re-embraces its great core values, a narrative for a Europe of democracy and consensus, of culture, of innovation, of competitiveness, a Europe of solidarity most of all, of the social state, of employment, since the younger generations can no longer be a Europe of recession, austerity, and vast unemployment. In only a couple of weeks ahead, Europe will hold European Parliament elections for the very first time since the Lisbon Treaty entered into force. This is a crossroad for Europe. And we, all of us, the friends of the European Union, being in Europe or right here in this country, we wait with great interest to see the result. Let me see, if you wish, say a few words about Greece's economy, because I told you before, we've been bombarded the last years with negative news from Athens. Well, let me bring the news which are different, hopeful, and very optimistic. Greece has its share in the European effort to overcome the consequences of the economic crisis, for sure. Following no less than 7 years of recession, a profound crisis, a debt crisis, a deficit crisis, a lack of competitiveness, Greece is returning to normalcy and self-reliance, thanks to the hard sacrifices of its citizens, but also to the solidarity expressed from our partners. Greece is achieving fiscal consolidation. It has recorded a primary budget surplus in 2013, and believe me, there are very few countries all over the world that can claim this today. At the same time, we have a balance of the current account, the deficit, as we used to say in the past, for the very first time in Greek history. The economy is expected in this current year to grow for the first time again after six full years. Our economy is turning a new page. Our sacrifices are paying off. It's not just the fiscal adjustment that is impressive. Equally impressive are the structural changes in public administration, in the labor market, in the social security system, in the opening up of markets and professions. Greece is the first among OECD countries, member states, I should say, in terms of structural changes. Equally important is the fact that Greece recapitalized its banks, Having a strong, recapitalized banking system is an extremely positive omen for Greece's real economy this time, for the funding of business, small, medium-sized business, which is the lifeline of our economy, for the return to positive growth rates. And if we have positive growth rates, we can be very optimistic about fulfilling our obligations. Just a few weeks ago, the successful bond sale took place, which raised $3 billion, the first such sale since 2010. That was, let me say, a crash test, and it was very successful. It's an indication that Greece is heading towards the right direction. There is still a lot to be done. The program is not over, of course, but this is a clear indication that the return to the markets is approaching. It constitutes an important sign in order to regain investors' confidence and reflects the positive effects of the far-reaching reforms undertaken by Greece. A few words, if you wish, about our presidency. The rotating presidency lasts, as you know, and the President said a minute ago, only 6 months. So in eternity, what's 6 months? Almost nothing. But every rotating presidency, even after the Lisbon Treaty, has a responsibility and a challenge to make its own mark there. And Greece has assumed the presidency of the Council at a time that Europe is going through a crucial transitional phase. The financial crisis imposed the implementation of restrictive fiscal policies in order to overcome initial deficiencies in the architecture of the European Monetary Union, to safeguard financial stability and gradually return to sustainable public finances. The big challenge for the European Union is to ensure prosperity and stability. For this, the European Union has to reaffirm its mission at the heart and mind of its citizens. In this context, the European Union is called upon today to tackle the financial crisis by safeguarding its common currency through the deepening of the EMU, through immediately promoting policies in order to deal with the recession and unemployment. Believe me, unemployment is the most ugly phase of the crisis. Suffice to, I don't like to bother you with figures, but just to give you an idea, the unemployment in my country is running above 26% for the general public. For the youth, it's something dramatic. It's just below 60%. You can imagine this is not sustainable. So what we have done, to provide our priorities, to convince our partners and the people of Europe that we should work towards a concrete direction. We set out from the very first day of our presidency 4 major categories of priorities. And because we have the crisis, I told you the very first one refers to growth, jobs, cohesion. That's what it matters most of all, the European citizens today. And not only the southern member states, the citizens of the southern states, but also this is, across European Union, it's felt. So growth, jobs, and cohesion. And when, in a period when unemployment has reached record high rates in most EU countries, affecting especially, as I told you, the youth, and when recession is a constant threat to European economies, growth cannot but figure as a matter of overriding importance for our presidency. Growth can benefit in a multifaceted way the economy, the social cohesion, which is very important for our open societies, and political stability, equally important for us, as it is the only way possible to remove European economies from backwater. From the Greek perspective, jobs and growth are structurally and inextricably connected. Striking the right balance between fiscal solidity and an effort to boost growth in implementation of the provisions of Europe, we call it 2020 strategy. It's a mega project, a vision for the future. So this is considered to be the catalyst towards achieving the necessary cohesion among national economic policies, hence among European societies. It is such a cohesion that constitutes the foundation of further European integration, which is the second priority of the Greek presidency. The main objective is to balance the timetable of fiscal consolidation with the implementation of a substantially enhanced and realistic compact for growth and jobs, which can be transformed into a diverse European investment program modeled after a cohesion policy with a focus on employment. The European Investment Bank, the EIB, can have a strong role in relation to the labor-intensive projects. That means small, medium-sized enterprises, basic infrastructure, energy and climate, also having the support and trust of the European Central Bank. In any case, it would be useful to launch a dialogue on those specific subject areas that offer high growth potential and at the same time job creation, such as innovation, services to firms, transport, shipping, and tourism. A Commission's white paper on this over the upcoming months will be the springboard for this project. The interim evaluation of the Europe 2020 strategy at the spring 2014, right now as we speak, in other words, at the European Council sets the context and offers the opportunity for concrete initiatives. A first but not sufficient step in the right direction was taken by the European Council back in last June, when European leaders decided at the same time to strengthen efforts to combat youth unemployment, but also to endorse the joint EIB Commission initiative entitled Investment Plan to finance small, medium-sized enterprises as the key employers in the European economy. The second priority of the Greek presidency is further integration of the European Union Eurozone. So, as I told you before, the European Union is in the process of building new institutions, which they have been lacking in the past. And the crisis just marked this terrible and tragic lack of institutions. As I speak to some American friends, suffice to tell you that here in the United States you have the currency, the dollar, and the federal bank. Well, 18 countries, member states of the European Union, they have a common currency, the euro, a very strong currency, but nothing like federal bank is at sight right there. So we have to build new this is an oversimplification, of course. Things are not as simple as that, but just to strike the difference between institution building, which we need very, very, very hard right now. So further integration of EU Eurozone is another priority of ours. In other words, tackling the financial and economic crisis in the Eurozone and completing the new European Monetary Union architecture will certainly remain one of the priorities, not only of ours, but of the following Italian presidency. You know, after the end of June, the rotating presidency is taken by our Italian friends. In this framework, progress on the following building blocks will be emphasized, and we have some positive results already because we have already 4 months of our presidency. Number one, the promotion of the banking union. Supervision, resolution, deposit guarantee at the European level on the basis of the new capital requirements. This remains essential to the improved functioning of the EMU and a prerequisite for increased confidence in the European economy. The Greek presidency has reached, since the regulation mechanism has been adopted, agreement with the European Parliament on the Council's decision on the single resolution mechanism. This is a very important thing, institutionally speaking. Second, agreement on the principles of the reinforced budgetary and economic integration frameworks. And third, special emphasis will be attached to the social dimension of the European Monetary Union as one of the pillars for its further deepening. At the same time, we will need to lay the foundations for an institutional structure that would ensure enhanced transparency, accountability, and representation for the whole exercise. This dimension entails particular importance as an answer to the demographic and fiscal crisis of the European welfare state, another big issue. The third priority has to do with migration, borders, mobility. You know that we are plagued, especially the member states on the south border of the European Union, with illegal immigration. And when the situation economically was good, that was not a great crisis, let's say. But nowadays, with the economic crisis, it is absolutely impossible for the member states of the periphery to take more immigrants, especially illegal immigrants who are struggling to survive. They need any help, and they should have any help, but unfortunately the struggling economy cannot provide them. So initiatives for migrating, border control and mobility in an orderly way are great priorities for all of us. I have to say that some of our partners, all of them, they do understand the problem, but some of them they feel immune because of geography. One who resides in Northern Europe will say, why should allow resources, for this? I have good Greeks and Italians, they are the buffer zone, but this is not the case, but because the problem has a spillover, and the social and political repercussions are felt all over Europe. So you see that they are fueling these extreme movements mainly from the far right, and the political systems that feel, the pressure from there. This is one more reason to put some kind of order there. So we took a lot of initiative. This issue of migration, illegal immigration, is particularly, as I told you, felt in the South. When my Prime Minister visited President Obama last August, that was taken up during their conversation in the Oval Office. And President Obama understood the magnitude of the problem. He promised every help to realize this. In the coming weeks, a high-powered delegation from my country is going to visit Washington, but not only Washington, also the West Coast and South, where the United States, they do have the avant-garde of their services to combat illegal migration, so they can transform to their European colleagues, to their Greek colleagues, ideas, even material ways they approach the same problem. The fourth, and I'm going to close with the priorities, the fourth priority has to do with the maritime policy. And this is only natural because Greece, being traditionally a maritime country, recognizes the great potential that maritime activities have of benefiting the European Union economy as a whole in a sustainable way. But this is very important for our American allies also. So against this background, some of our achievements already are, all in all, I'm going to make a very, very brief reference on our achievements so far in our presidency. Number one, the adoption of the single resolution mechanism as the pillar of the banking union. The agreement is central to the efforts towards deepening the union and comes after the conclusion of a series of important legislative actions during the first 3 months of our presidency. The adoption of the regulation on investment in innovation, the directive on maritime spatial planning that will have significant effects on tourism as well as the environment, and of course the regulation on surveillance of the Union's external sea borders. The adoption of the regulation constitutes a very important step that took many, many years to reach. Sustaining the growth that is now underway is the challenge that faces Europe's economy. This year's evaluation confirms that growth is beginning to return, and member states are now making progress in connecting the imbalances that were developed before the crisis. That's what we do in Greece especially, but not only Greece. This is a pan-European problem. We consider the Eurozone integration to be the catalyst in persuading the markets about the sustainable overcoming of the crisis. A full banking union with effective supervisory, resolution, deposit guarantee mechanisms at the European level, cut with genuine fiscal and economic union as specified in the European Commission's blueprint and the European Council President's roadmap. We see this as the natural next step to the fiscal coordination framework already in place. Democratic legitimacy and accountability should be an integral part for this process. To this end, we work up to the end of our presidency with greater involvement of both the European Parliament and national parliaments in achieving EMU reform. Let me say, if I may, I know the time is flying, but just a few words about an issue very keen on both sides of the Atlantic. I'm referring to the transatlantic relations. So in these difficult times, when growth and jobs are our top priority for our economies, what we call TTIP is the acronym in Washington. I hope it's well understood. It stands for Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. TTIP, I'm going to say it, it's easier for us also. And it was a Greek American from the office of the US Trade Representative that Baptist, she was, found in the name this TTIP, which is peculiar just a bit. So TTIP is expected to make a major contribution towards that direction. What is TTIP? It's a mega trade project, and it's going to bring in much more capital, jobs, and confidence to the transatlantic economic relations. Now, it's not very easy because there are portions and segments in our societies, both here in the United States and back in Europe, that they would feel more comfortable with a more protective environment. It's good for them in their own small world to have walls and protection instead of open up and go for a full liberalization, if I may say so, of economic trade relations. But we are convinced that both sides of the Atlantic will benefit from the TTIP. The two economies remain strongly intertwined, and no other commercial artery in the world is as integrated. To give you the magnitude of our economic relations, suffice to tell you the transatlantic economy generates $5 trillion in total commercial sales a year and employ up to 15 million workers in mutually onshore jobs on both sides of the Atlantic. Our relationship has been further reinforced with the successful conclusion of the EU-US summit just a few weeks ago when President Obama visited for the very first time since he took office Brussels, and he held this EU-US summit back in March with the transatlantic trade and investment partnership being at the core of the discussions there. The Greek presidency, of course, supports the negotiations and also the balanced trade and investment agreements between the EU and third countries. Deep and comprehensive trade and economic partnership agreements constitute instruments aimed to advance economic integration and regulatory convergence, thus contributing to more trade and the creation of a positive business environment. However, we can all benefit from TTIP if we successfully deal with all three pillars of the agreement, namely market access, regulatory and rules, and if we manage to address effectively key areas where divergences exist. And one of the jobs we have as ambassadors accredited to Washington is to make as many contacts as we can up with members of your legislative bodies where we can face some kind of resistance, but I hope the whole message from the administration and for the legislators is all positive. For the EU foreign policy, I won't say a lot of things. I will leave it, if you wish, for our dialogue, if you wish to have a few minutes of a dialogue. And on the other hand, I have to remind everyone that foreign policy, as I told you before, after the Lisbon Treaty, is not entirely. To the contrary, very few segments of that, they are up to the rotating presidency. Most of the job is the responsibility of a new institution headed right now by Lady Cathy Ashton. I would like to stop here because I'm afraid the time is passing, with a very positive and optimistic note that Europe is alive. I'll close with a remark which is impressive, I hope. I found it impressive. A few years ago, Poland had somehow the GDP of Ukraine. Poland is a few years a member state, and it succeeded to open up its democratic institutions, be a free society, and it has triple the GDP that it used to have. That's one more reason why Ukraine, our friends in Ukraine, they fight to be members of the European Union. So the vision of the United Europe is still alive. Thank you for your attention, and if you would like to have a dialogue, I'll be happy to. How about the Wizards? You know, the Wizards, those of you like basketball, they are owned by a Greek American, a very good friend of mine, Ted Leonsis. For so many years, Wizards, they have been at the bottom of the league, but right now is the pride of Washington. How's that? You don't like Wizards? Okay. This is the answer.
If I might ask, I'm sorry. I listened to your remarks interestedly. It was very much appreciated. You indicate there's 26% unemployment. Today's paper talks about slow growth with the possibility of deflation for Europe. And there's a cutback in social welfare, I gathered from what you were saying. I wonder where you stand just on the divide of increased social welfare legislation, or the nation states of social welfare legislation, and austerity, as far as resolving the kind of economic difficulties that Europe is confronted with. Because we've had different experiments of Iceland, Ireland, in approaching this, and how do you see the best solution? And Mario Draghi said today, give us another month to answer questions. That's a pretty tough way to respond to a Greek crisis type of situation. 26 unemployment. I don't know how an economy manages that 26% unemployment and generate business. People don't have money. How the heck do you do that?
You want to take some other and have a, because the time is going on? Thank you. That's a very good question. Yeah.
It may sound dumb, but I just would like to be updated on the role of Germany in to Greece and to the European Union, because everyone's relying on Germany, and Americans, they all sort of look almost at who's the power there.
Okay. Okay.
Your Excellency, thank you for your speech. My name is Andrew Woodley. I'm a graduate student of International Political Economy at Fordham University, and I would like to ask for your opinion in regards to the far-right parties that have appeared within the last couple of years in Europe. And do you think this is something very temporary, or do you think that in the present economic situation this is something that's going to gain more energy over time? Thank you.
Yes. If I may start with our friend, the last question, which is a very acute problem right now, especially because we are heading towards electing the new members of the European Parliament. And you get all the information coming from Europe that especially in the countries that they are hard hit by the economic crisis, the problem of extreme far right containing some kind of Nazi and fascist ideology is present and threatening. Of course, nobody would argue that Greece was hit the hardest of all of Europe. The political system, it came the upside down. And if you take that in an abstract academic look, you see that that would be only normal. Because if the extremes, they don't flourish right now, when they're going to flourish, this is a very extreme situation where, as we said before, unemployment is running out of control. The medium class, as we like to call it, the backbone of our society, is falling apart. So what we took in the past as given is vanishing. And that creates a lot of anger and discredits the main political parties. We say to our American friends, this is not only a Greek phenomenon, I have to say, but it's more pronounced in my country, because you find this kind of movements in other countries with somehow deeper roots, I should say. Well, I tell you what, I'm 60 years old. I never met a Nazi or a fascist in Greece, because my country has fought with heroism against Nazis and we suffered so many things that I don't think anyone in Greece would adopt their ideology. So who are all these people? They are, we believe, disoriented, majority of them, and they are manipulated by some elites they have. And the fuel for this is what? Is the economic crisis. The sooner we get back to normalcy, the better it is, because we have reasons to believe they're going to go back to the margin of the political life where they belong and where they have been in the past. There have been some kind of this phenomena in my country in the past, but they were totally insignificant. They were 1%, 1.5%, but no major role in the political game. Right now, some of these, referring probably with the infamous Golden Dawn, the Gallups, they give them much more power right now. And the reason is exactly the desperation of people who would like, quote, to teach a lesson, the government and the main political stream, and they don't care about the cost because they feel they have nothing to lose. But I have news for them. They have to lose a lot. The situation is very difficult, but it can get worse if we don't take the necessary steps. And people, they tend to forget very easily. I belong to the previous generation. I have narratives from my relatives immediately after the World War, how desperate the situation was. So nothing is given, especially democracy, a free, open society, human rights, respect for the different, and respect for the minority. So the answer is, it's a big political problem, but all together, with joint forces, we can overcome this. And we hope that the answer, first of all, with the European election, is going to be sound for everyone. Now, if I may go back to your Germany question, the Chancellor was in Washington a week ago. She met with President Obama, IMF, and she was very kind to brief us, the European ambassadors. Nobody questions the role of Germany as the powerhouse of the European economy. But in Europe, we do have institutions, and we pride ourselves that building these institutions is part of the success and the vision of our united Europe. I would agree with you, probably you didn't say that directly, but you imply that Germany had and has major responsibilities. Of course, there are political forces that govern Germany. It's not necessary for all of us to agree with this. To the contrary, we have a different approach into what created the crisis and what is the way out. And let me tell you that because I was lucky enough to see President Obama on different occasions, and the top of this administration here in the United States is not agreeing 100% with the recipe, let's say, that's coming out of Berlin. But what's the way out? To sit down, talk, find the commonly accepted way out, and implement all together what we agreed. And that's what the European Council is doing. The European Council is a very peculiar body. It's a very difficult thing for an American to understand what it is. If you get frustrated sometimes with what's going on in the Congress and the Senate and the administration, the back and forth, imagine you have 28 different nations, so many different interests. I have right here some colleagues that have been through countless European councils where you gather 28 leaders charged with all this pressure from their own capitals to deliver, and usually you start very easily with a nice dinner, the European Council, and in a matter of hours you expect to deal with very important issues. So they close the leaders in a big room, and usually it goes up to 2, 3, 4, even overnight, and they come out with a decision. They should tackle very important issues. Sometimes I'm saying that to explain to you how difficult it is to find a consensus. There are different forces, different interests, and then we have the leaders at the European Council trying to make a compromise. Up to now, Europe is working very well. Nothing is given, nothing is easy. I say that as a representative of a country that went through incredibly difficult years. And we all agree we had to make reforms, but we are not all convinced that the path we took 4 years ago, it was the right or the shortest one. So the worst, we believe, is behind us, and that's the general belief all over. And the time is going to come to see who did what kind of responsibility they had. But again, I have to come back to the sacrifice made by Greek citizens. I don't believe that in a peacetime they have another developed nation, but because still Greece is a developed nation, it's the 30th more important economy in the world, still after the crisis, to go through all this upheaval. But as I said, the worst is behind us, and we can be more optimistic about the future. Now, to your observation about welfare and what you do, this is a major problem not only for Europe, but all over the world. Even in this country, they do face similar questions. They are not easy answers. In our small scale in Greece, we're trying to make very bold steps forward. Believe me, it's not easy, because you take decisions that they affect people, they feel the injustice in themselves, and they create social reactions very, very hard. What we can do about this is a major issue. I wish we could have the time to discuss about this. I think that no matter what, with or without the crisis, welfare system is something to be reformed, because the way of life of the economy requires this. And indeed, I think a lot of pain in the future, and is going to be met if we have to stabilize the system, which is not stable right now. Some countries, they ought to go a different way. Some countries, they are more advanced, but all in all, especially in the south, the situation is critical. If you go and visit, the Greek welfare system and the way they are trying to reform it the hard way during the crisis, you'd be surprised with the sacrifice that they are required from the people. As I told you before, the most ugly phase of the economic crisis is unemployment. You refer to it. How we are going to overcome this? I don't mean that we have done with this. The first signs that the situation is stabilized, they are right there. There is a marginal reduction in the numbers of unemployment, but that doesn't mean anything. We have a long way to go. And what is the answer? Growth. In order to have growth, you need fresh money, which we don't have right now in Greece. Just oversimplifying the picture to say what I have in mind. You need investors from abroad. In order to have investors from abroad, you have to convince them to gain their confidence. And that's what we're trying to do. And after the crisis, Greece is a very appealing place for investors. As we speak right now, we have at least 4 mega projects for the scale of Greece, of course, successfully attracting foreign investors. Those, they're going to give thousands of new jobs and help, gain growth. And as I told you before, if you take it a very small scale, if you have growth, you can meet your obligations, no matter how high they are. If you don't have growth, no matter how much money you get from abroad, it's going down the drain. So it's a very difficult issue. It's at the forefront. I believe that growth is the magic word for this.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Avramopoulos.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity you gave me. Thanks.
In the spirit of celebrating Europe Day, let's turn to music. 3 students, award-winning students of the music department, Wayne Wang, Igor Piakisen, probably mispronounced, and Carrie Bean from our music department, and who have traveled already around the globe, will begin by a movement from Franz Schubert's Second Piano Trio, and they will close with the first and last movement from Dvorak Piano Damki Trio, which is really based on folk music, European type folk music.